Now, the school that you taught at for your second year was not the same school that you
No.
taught at for your first year. Second year, you taught at the Star School.
Right.
And where was the Star School located?
Well, Star School was located on, I think it's 68th Street, isn't it? Yeah, Pratt Lake. Yeah. And it's just about a mile from Ivan's folks' farm on Wingar Avenue. And they would pay me, how I got this school was, they would pay me $1,000 more than what I was teaching at Mapes. So my school salary was $2,000. And that's
$1,000 more, so you doubled it.
Yes.
Sounds like a pretty good year.
How about that?
Yeah. Now you have a picture of yourself right here with the number of your students.
Yes.
Maybe you can hold that one up as well, and kind of talk about where you are and where your students are there, and maybe some of their names too.
I can't remember. Oh, of course, I'm over here on the left-hand side, and left-hand side.
Yep.
Some of my students, well, I could name them all. From left to right, there was Billy Hoffman and Steve Hostel and Marlon Kaufman and Roger Shepard, Wayne Kaufman, Stan Wingar, Larry Hoffman was in the front row, Susie Hoffman, Larry Wingar, Billy Wells, and Philip Cease, yeah. He was my kindergartner there at that school. And I spent many recess at that school at that time being sick to my stomach because I was, in about December, I was pregnant for Michael.
Your first.
My first,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. All right, good. Let's stop it right there for a second. Would be a good place. Okay. So you've been teaching at Star School now for about a year,
Right.
and throughout that year, you had gotten pregnant with
Right.
with your firstborn, which would become Michael,
Right,
and you were ill for about 6 months, as you had said during that time period.
right.
So after becoming pregnant and after teaching that full year at the Star School, you decided you were going to take some time off and you were going to raise a family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so beginning in 1952, that's when you had your oldest, Michael.
Michael.
And from there you had Cindy, Mark, and Melinda.
Right.
And so here's the picture of the family that they were going to start. And maybe you can just kind of point out who's who in that picture there a little bit.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Maybe move it back there like that.
Well, of course, let's see. Of course, there's myself and Ivan and Mike and Cindy and Mark and Melinda.
Now from there, you of course, you knew you wanted to have a family and everything like that. And during this time, you had been living in your apartment. And where was your apartment exactly?
Well, it was upstairs in Grandma and Grandpa's house. Ivan had built an apartment up there for us before we got married. And so that's where we lived, and that's where Mike was born. And, I mean, he was born in Grand Rapids at the hospital, but that's where he was. And then Cindy was going to be born, and about a year, well, not quite a year later, why she was, before that she was conceived there. And so then we decided that we needed more room because it was only just a kitchen and eating area and a living room and one bedroom and a bath up there. So, then we had to go through Grandma and Grandpa's house to get upstairs.
Yeah.
And so then we looked for someplace else to move, and we moved over and rented from Leo Bryant, who lived on M50, farm there on M50. He wasn't doing the farm anymore, working the farm, but we had a house there, and there was a barn and a chicken coop, I believe.
And you had a little bit more space in that house than you did up in the apartment.
Definitely.
About how large was that house?
Well, it had a back porch, an enclosed back porch, and a good-sized kitchen, and a dining room, and a living room, and a bathroom downstairs, and we used as a playroom for Mike and Cindy when she came along. And then it had 3 bedrooms upstairs. And Leo Bryant rented or had one of the bedrooms upstairs. And that was part of the deal. We rent from him, but he had 1 bedroom upstairs.
So you started your family here, and you've got a couple kids now. You've got Mike and Cindy, and you're living at Leo Bryant's farm.
Right.
And while you're living at Leo Bryant's farm, you had something quite remarkable happen there. What was it that kind of caught you off guard, but it happened at the farm?
Yeah, in the spring, there were, we, of course, living in Michigan, why there were always tornadoes, and this year there happened to be this tornado that went through Standale, and we listened to that. Of course, tuned into the radio to find out about them and where they were and so on and so forth, and while we were listening to the radio, Ivan had put I had put the kids to bed, and I was just coming downstairs, and it sounded like a train was, because we lived right near the railroad tracks, and I had said to Ivan, well, that sounds like a train, but I didn't know there was one of those this time of night. And we looked out the windows, the front windows that were, because the stairs came down, and there was a living room on this side and the playroom on this side, with the stairs going up in between, and that had windows all across the front of the house. And we looked out and we could see the electric line snapping as this, what we saw was a tornado coming for us. So, and this big roar sounded like a lot like a train. And Ivan said for me, because I was expecting Mark, I was pregnant for Mark, and he said, you run to the basement, which was a door in the kitchen, and I will get the kids. So he took them about 2 steps at a time up and grabbed each one of the kids. They were sleeping in the same room, one under each arm. And as he got downstairs and in the kitchen, and I got to the door of the basement, we were on the landing of the basement, and it was so loud we couldn't hear each other. And we were right next to each other, and we still couldn't hear each other. And we did get down into the basement. Some of the basement windows were broken, and there were some boards were flying in and that sort of thing. But and as quickly as that went over, it just got deathly still. After that whole thing, that tornado was gone, it was just deathly still. And of course, we had no lights or anything because that had all been disrupted. And so we finally went upstairs, and Ivan said, well, he'd better go over and see how his folks were, because they were not too far from where we lived on M50. And so he got in the car. Well, as flashes of light, then it started to rain, and thunder and lightning, and the flashes of light, you could see where there were sticks of wood that had been driven right into a tree that was out in our yard. And we looked out the front windows, and there was a little woods across the street. The whole woods was just flat. There was no woods there at all. It was just flat. And so when he got out to the car, and the car was not in a garage, it just sat out there, nothing. There wasn't a thing wrong with the car. Nothing. The only thing I found in the house that had been damaged was that a big cake plate that stood on a pedestal that I had gotten, or we had gotten as a wedding present, it had busted it right in two. Now it's in the china cabinet. Excuse me. Nothing else had been touched in the china cabinet except that plate that had been busted right in two. But there had been pieces of wood that were driven into the side of the house. And later on, we found that that cracks started to appear in the walls of the house where the tornado had taken the house and twisted it, but not taken it off its foundation or anything, but just had twisted it enough so that there were cracks starting in the house. And the barn that was out behind our house, it had taken the roof of the barn and picked the whole roof up and set it down again so that half of the roof was hanging off the barn, and the part of the roof on this end of the barn was missing. It had also picked up the watering tank that they'd had for the animals out there. It had picked that up because it was tin or heavy, and it picked that up and twisted it and threw it over into where the woods used to be. But anyway, when Ivan got over to his folks' place, they didn't even know anything had happened. That close, less than 2 miles away, and nothing had happened at their house at all. It wasn't even raining or anything over there.
Now the tornado came at a time where you had actually thought about purchasing a house. And in fact, you talked about purchasing this house as well. Fortunately, you didn't purchase this house with the cracks that were in it, and different things that you'd found and different problems that you'd had. But, no less, you had this family, that was growing at this time. You wanted a house of your own. And so you started to look elsewhere.
Yes.
And where did you start to look for a house?
Well, first of all, the house that we were thinking of buying was that house. And Leo had, we talked to him about using the rent we were paying towards a down payment. And but he had the night of the tornado, he wasn't home. He was elsewhere, and he was elsewhere selling the house and farm to somebody else. So that night of the tornado, he had sold a place before the tornado had hit the house, of course. So anyway, then we had to move, so we started looking. We didn't have any, couldn't find anything because it was mostly farms around Alto area, and we didn't have enough to put down on a farm or anything. So
Because you didn't want to put your
right,
parents into debt or
right,
anything like that.
right. We didn't want either one of them co-signing for us, because which they would have done, but we didn't want to put either one of them into debt. So anyway, we started looking in Lowell here, and came across the house here at 623 North Jefferson, of which we were very happy, and we liked the house very much, and could see a lot of potential in it. So we found a little sign in the front window in one of the bay windows with a telephone number on it, and it was for a Mrs. Lambkin over in who had a antique shop in Saranac, and she was the one that owned the house, and so we called her, and she came and made arrangements and came over, and we went through the house and liked it very much, and so when we brought, of course, my folks and Ivan's folks to look it over and show them, and we were thrilled with the house, even though it needed a lot of work, and the yard, of course, had been let go, and it was, the whole back was full of shumac, and the grass was tall around here and so on, but we liked it, and they did not. They were very unhappy. Both sets of parents. Well, the mothers, the fathers, they had no problem, but the mothers were very unhappy.
Yeah, fathers could see some potential.
Right.
Mothers not so much.
Neither mother there could see. Neither one of the mothers.
Maybe there was a reason or multiple reasons that they saw in the house. What were some of those things that they saw they didn't care for?
Let's see. First of all, they saw that the bathtub was full of cans that had been emptied of whatever was canned in them, like tomatoes that had been canned in them. But anyway, the whole bathtub was full of these dirty cans. And the cupboards had some, in the kitchen, had food left in them and so on. And of course, there was nothing but subfloors. And it was just more than either the grandmas could picture. It could be a house that they could live in.
Yeah, they'd even previously kind of ruined the dining room a little bit.
Yes,
you know.
Mrs. Lambkin had rented it out. It had only had one renter in it, but they had ruined all the woodwork in the dining room by trying to paint it and the walls, and not doing a good job and so on. And so with all of those things, grandmas were not happy.
There was a significant feature in the kitchen area as well that you'll always remember.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, the hot water heater stood in the kitchen, and it had quite an elaborate system of water setup in it. It was an old house, and there were pipes running along the ceiling, and that ran to the hot water heater. And if you wanted any hot water, hot water heater was hooked up to the furnace, of which it had to be a coal furnace at that time. And so you even in the summertime would have to build a fire to get hot water, or else boil it all on the stove. And so, but what we used to call the hot water heater, Henrietta. That was the hot water heater's name. And for years, because we couldn't afford anything else, why we did have to stoke it up to get hot water to do washing or whatever.
And we know you bought the house at 623 North Jefferson
Right.
because that's where we are today.
Right.
But how did it come about that you were able to purchase this house? What did you do for funds?
Well, we finally went. We didn't have in our day. We paid for everything by cash, and if we wanted something new, like a stove, or if you were going to buy the stove or whatever, you paid for it by cash. Or you didn't get it until you had the cash to pay for it. So anyway, Mr. Townsend, we went to buy something from Mr. Townsend, who had a furniture business here. He also sold batteries and tires and all those things besides furniture and so on. And anyway, I can't remember what it was we went to buy there, but finally he said, "Don't you have any kind of credit?" And we said, "No, we didn't, because we paid cash." And he said, "Well, I think you ought to establish some credit." So we did then buy something on credit. We paid something down. Didn't have a credit card at that time; those weren't even around. But we did buy something on credit and paid so much for it, and finally purchased it. So we went to the bank. We didn't know what we were going to do for funds for the house. But so we went to the bank, and at first the bank said no, because we didn't have anything to go on, really. We didn't have anything as collateral. So we went to what they call Lowell Savings and Loan, and run by Mr. Coons. And so he loaned us the money, and
how much money did you need at that time to purchase the house?
We purchased this house was $10,000 with all the land. What was it? I've forgotten. Almost an acre. Yeah, something like that of land.
All right. So you moved into 623 North Jefferson. You know that it needed a lot of work. You know what your family had felt about this house before and everything like that. And this was about the time that you were going to have another baby as well.
Mark.
Okay. And so you had Mark. So at this time, you were going to obviously be staying home with 3 kids now.
Right.
And Ivan was going to go off to work. And what kind of things did he do for a job once you moved here?
Well, he had been, he started out after he got out of high school, and he went to work picking apples for Mr. Timpson, in the apple orchards. And then Red Graham came along, and Red Graham was a builder, and he came along and asked Dad if he wanted a job. And so Dad became a carpenter with Red Graham. Dad's had several cousins that also worked for Red Graham. So I think they probably, Red needed help, and I think probably they had suggested Dad to Red Graham. So he worked for years for Mr. Graham as a carpenter.
So you were around here with the kids, taking care of the kids. Grandpa was going off to work and doing his thing with Red Graham at this time. So, early on you didn't have a lot of money.
No.
Okay? But yet you found certain things to still have fun and kind of do what you want to do at different times. So, different times you would go and have kind of fun with the kids, and you go to different ball games and stuff like that.
Our fun was ball games.
Right.
Dad still played over in Freeport, and so when he'd have, of course, he could do that after he got home from work, play ball, and so he'd pack us up in our car that we had, and I would sit behind the backstop with the kids and the other wives who had little kids, and the men would play ball. And there were times when they'd have to stop the ball game because there was a fire, and a lot of the guys were on the Freeport Fire Department, so they'd have to stop and lay down their gloves and go to the fire wherever it was, and then come back and resume the game.
And they would resume it.
And they would resume the game, and then that was it. That was our fun.
Okay, but during this time, besides having kids and besides going to ball games, you were involved in a number of different groups. One of those different things that you got involved with was the Methodist Church.
Well, yeah.
What did you help out with in the Methodist Church?
Well, before we were married, because we were married down here in the Methodist Church down here, I would teach Sunday school there, and then afterwards I was, of course, in the ladies, they called it United Methodist Women, which were the women's part of the church, and we would have meetings and put on dinners and do different things such as that.
Okay. And as time went on, you got involved in some other things too, including like the evening club.
Right.
Okay, and what exactly is the evening club?
Well, evening club was, I think, mainly put together years before I was in it, just because that you could leave your children, most of the women could leave their children with their husbands, and we'd have a night where we'd get together and somebody would put on a program, either a book review or tell of maybe travelogue that they did, or some kind of a program that we would do. And that was all that we did. We weren't in the business of going out and doing anything, like any projects or anything. We were just, it was some place where the women could go and kind of rest and enjoy themselves.
Okay. And Mike and Cindy were getting a little bit older at this time, and you were actively involved in a couple of clubs that they were involved in as well, including Campfire Girls with Cindy and the Boy Scouts. You were involved, both you and Grandpa were involved with it as well. Were there any things that happened, in Campfire Girls or in the Boy Scouts that you specifically were involved with?
Well, Campfire Girls, I had Mrs. Regan, Carol Regan, and I had a group that Campfire Girls, made up of some of her girls and Cindy and some other girls, and of course, and we would have meetings and teach them different things. And as far as the Boy Scouts went, I helped Grandpa. He was Cub Scout leader for a number of years, and so I would, at that time, he was traveling for, he'd left carpentry and he was traveling for Grand Rapids Sash and Door, and he was traveling down in the southern part of Michigan. And so he would be gone for a number of days. and seeing businesses down there. And so when he'd come home on Thursday night, I'd have all of his scout stuff ready for him so that he'd come walking in the door of where we were having the scout meetings, and I'd hand him his stuff and he'd take off with scouts. So that's the way I worked with him on that.
All right. Now, eventually down the line here, kids are getting a little bit older yet, and along comes a call. You got a call from a school superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
And who was that superintendent, and what was he calling you about?
Well, I had started just before that. I had started a program for the Y nursery, and so I had worked in that for a little bit. And then Mr. Nesbitt, Steve Nesbitt, was the superintendent at that time. And he called me and asked if I would start teaching school for him. And it was when they were consolidating all the little one-room schools around in the Alto area and out towards Murray Lake, and all of the little country schools came and voted to come into consolidation of Lowell schools. And so they needed teachers. So he asked me if I would come in and teach for kindergarten. And of course, before they got the school made, built out in Alto, we used the one-room schools as different grade levels. So my kindergarten was over at a think of the name of the school now. All I can think of is Mapes, but that wasn't it. Anyway,
it was a one-room schoolhouse?
Yeah, it was a one-room schoolhouse, and I had nothing but kindergartners over there. And they would come early in the morning, and then they'd pick them up after lunch and take them home. So we just had a half-a-day kindergarten, but it really started for kindergartner very early in the morning.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And this would have been about 1963.
Around in there.
About that time that you started to go back,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And in kindergarten at Alto, in that one-room schoolhouse,
mm-hmm.
you had a number of different stories that you could probably share with us about a little boy named Adolf.
Oh, yes. Well, when they finally finished the Alto school, then I started teaching kindergarten at the Alto school. And I had large kindergarten groups. Nowadays, if you have 25, well, I had many more than 25. And anyway, I had a little boy named Adolf Kotuski in my kindergarten who was a child that could not communicate with any of the rest of the kids other than he had one favorite word, which was cowboy. And he would jump around. Sometimes he would get up from the desk or wherever he was playing, because he'd play all by himself, and excuse me, run around with a black crayon. He'd grab a black crayon, which he loved, and write on people's heads, just color on their heads, and yelling "cowboy, cowboy, cowboy." He was, and I did not know what I was going to do with him because he was very disruptive, but the kids tolerated him very well, and we talked, and they tolerated him very well. Well, during this time, we did not have a playground over at Alto School, so we had to take them over across the road and down a ways to the old two-room school. Still had a playground, even though they weren't using the school. There was some playground equipment there. So this one day, it was in the spring, and I got them all together, and of course we held hands, and off we went to the playground. Well, Adolf I usually had by the hand, and he was at my side most of the time. Something, and I can't remember the situation, but anyway, I had to attend to something else, and he got away from me, and he ran behind the swings. Somebody was swinging, and as they came back like this, it caught Adolf right here in his forehead. And of course, it cut a deep gash in his head. And here I was with myself and I don't know, about 30 kids and Adolf. And so anyway, I grabbed him and I pinched the wound as best I could and got the other kids together. They were very good. And I said, hang on to each other, picked him up. And by the time we got anyway back to the school, I was covered in blood as well as was Adolf. But we got a hold of his parents and they took him down and got his head sewed up. By the middle of that, towards the end of that year, I should say, after that incident and some other things had gone on, his folks moved to Chicago, so I never did know whatever happened to Adolf. But with a name like Adolf Koteski, I figured he had a couple of strikes against him anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Now, this is about the time that you were going to go back to school as well.
Yes.
You had gotten a high school diploma. You had gotten a diploma from the normal college, but now you're going to work on your bachelor's degree and finish that up. So where did you go to work on that?
Well, I decided that I would go to Western, only at that time, Western was doing a lot of off-campus classes. And so I could go to Grand Rapids and take classes there at night. And also they offered classes over at the Ionia Reformatory. Why they did that was because many of the guards over there could get money from the reformatory if they went to school and took classes. So a couple of the other gals and myself would take classes that we needed towards our bachelor's over there at the Ionia Reformatory. Be many times that we would be in class and there would come the call over the loudspeaker that everything was on lockdown because we were in the same building as the worst of the criminals. That's where and many times we would be escorted, the guards would escort us off the Ionia Reformatory campus there and out to 21 to be on our way home. So we had gave us a little bit of excitement in our classes that we took, yes.
Yeah, so during this time while you're either at class or teaching, you got a number of kids at home.
Mm-hmm.
Who was helping you take care of the kids at this time?
Well, my mother would take care of the kids, would take care of Melinda because she was the smallest, she and Mark. And then Mike and Cindy usually came to my room and after school and wait for me, and then after I finished, we'd go pick up Mark and Melinda. So Grandma Barber, because Grandpa had passed away by that time, and so I would pay her to sit with the kids.
And by 1969, you actually started teaching in Lowell again
Mm-hmm.
at Runtsman School.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you were teaching the second grade.
Right.
How did you feel about that grade?
Oh, I liked second grade. I had a good time with second grade. We'd, of course, do, to me it was a fun grade. I'm always very partial to kindergarten.
Yeah.
But that, I guess, would be my favorite. But second grade was a fun grade.
You had a number of fun activities that you do with the kids, too.
Yeah.
You do a pancake breakfast.
Right.
And have some picnics and do some
Right.
sledding and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Any special stories?
Well, I don't know. I just different young people have come up and said to me. I still remember when we'd come up to your house and have a picnic in the backyard or go sledding down the hill or whatever. So and as time went on, when Grandpa started to build a boat, why we'd go over there and sit on different however the boat was being built, where it was the first floor, the second floor, whatever, and eat our lunches lots of times, and so just if I were going to teach, I like making it fun.
Yeah. And after teaching the second grade, you had the opportunity through Title I to become a reading teacher
Right.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did that job go as a reading teacher?
Well, it went well. It was an entirely different thing. All you were responsible for was, of course, the children that came to you from each grade, and you had to do quite a bit of testing and figure out what children were going to be in your classes and so on. And the other, my cohort that was with me was Mrs. Thaler, who was one of my favorite people, and we did get along. We then, from being just the reading teachers and taking the children out of the rooms, we went on to start the program where the school just used one reading series, because we were finding that each teacher would have her own series that she would use, or maybe she had a couple series that she would use with different reading in different reading groups. And so we set up a program, and also started the paraprofessional group program in our school system, where each grade had a paraprofessional to help them with the reading program. And we found there were teachers who liked that. There were teachers who were resistant to that. There was a lot we had to do to, and a lot of steps that we went through before we got everything straightened out.
And you started off doing these things at Runciman School, but eventually down the line, you had to move. And from Runciman School, you went where? Where was your classroom?
My car was my classroom because I taught out at Lowell, or out at Alto, I mean. I had a reading center out there. I had a reading center over in Bushnell, and sometimes would go into the middle school. I had a couple reading teachers there that I worked with, and a couple even in the high school. And we also did the Catholic schools. So we did quite a bit of traveling around to different buildings. So I, for quite a while, did not have any one stationary place. I was on the move.
Yeah. So you're on the move quite a bit. You at one point you went from Runciman, I think, to Riverside, and they didn't give you a classroom.
No.
Instead, they put you somewhere else. Where did they put you?
They put us in the girls' locker room, and so that year, Grandpa came over. Ivan came over, and he put in some shelves for me, and so we could keep our material, and fixed over the girls' locker rooms. Was where we had our reading center.
And from Riverside, you eventually moved to a new school, and they in Bushnell School on the other side of the river. They actually built you your own reading center at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So kind of you bounced from Bushnell to Alto, and you had to go to these different locations as well. So a lot of your stuff was in your car. But you really got involved with all the reading that was happening within the district, district-wide.
I was involved with reading at the different levels in our district, and then I was also involved with Kent County reading program and the Michigan reading program.
Okay. All right. And what kind of things were you in charge of for Kent County, for the reading council, or for the Michigan Reading Association?
Yeah. Well, I was one year was president of Kent Reading Council, and that was where all the school districts would send their reading teachers, and we would have somebody that was knowledgeable in the reading business, maybe from some of the colleges or or from the state, would come and do a program, or an author would come in and do a program. And then also I was involved with the Michigan Reading Association. I was held excuse me, some different offices in that, one of them was I was in charge of the membership, which was statewide membership, and I would have to send out membership notices all over the state and that sort of thing, and then I was the head of the Michigan Reading Association would hold their statewide conferences in Grand Rapids, and I and other ones would come together as the local group, and we would set up the different rooms at the Pantland. At that time, the Pantland Hotel for decorate them if we were going to have a events, social event there, and put all of that together for the Michigan Reading Association State Conference.
Yep. So the Patland Hotel is the Amway Grand today.
Right, yeah,
And
right.
and you had a lot of things to do because you had to set up things during the day at the conference,
Right,
and different speakers that would
Right.
come, and then at night you had to set up a
Right.
variety of different things,
Right.
that were more maybe fun
right,
oriented, like
Right.
dances
Right.
and such that you
Right.
put together.
or whatever.
So you were the Michigan Reading Association president at that point. Is that
Well,
correct?
at one of them,
Okay.
1 year I was, yes. And at that time, when I was president, I had to plan the conference, the whole conference. And that meant I had to get all of anybody that came in to do a program, like authors from all over the United States, or different speakers from different colleges all over the United States. And I had to plan out how we were going to use all the rooms at the hotel, the Patland Hotel, and where in the different hotels or motels around the city of Grand Rapids where people were going to stay, and how we would transport them from wherever they were at that hotel to Grand Rapids. So we'd have to organize the bus service, and we had to have somebody that would pick people up at the airport, and Grandpa did that. Was that year. He and several other of our husbands would be on that. So we really involved not only ourselves but our husbands, many of us, in what we were doing that week of the conference.
Yeah, pretty big conference there.
Yeah,
A
well,
lot of different committees that you had to organize.
The year I was president, there were 4,000 in attendance.
Oh, okay. All right. Now this is by the time that you had gotten your master's degree as well.
No, I didn't. Let's see, did I have my master's by that time?
If you had your master's by maybe about 1976.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And yes, and so I had received my master's.
And where did you get your master's degree from?
From Western also.
Okay. Okay. So you've got several different degrees here. You're in several different organizations, including the Michigan Reading Association now, and you've along the path here. You've been the president of that association as well, and with some of your different reading associations, you also were able to travel to places like New Orleans.
Yes.
And what did you do there?
Well, you went to a conference just like the one you put on, only it would be international. A reading association, and so you would hear speakers that came from other countries, as well as some speakers from around the United States, because reading is an international organization.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Now with all those things going on, you got to be pretty stressed out. You're
Yes.
staying awful busy. You got a lot of things to coordinate here. You've got a family that you're, dealing with too, and everything like that. So
kids in many sports, and going to college, and graduating, and all that sort of thing.
Yep. So by 1991, about that time, early 1990s, you were pretty stressed with everything that was happening here. And what happened to you at that time?
Well, at that time, I had a stroke. I had a really bad headache, and I had taught school that day, but I had just a horrible headache, and it was more in the back of my head than it was up here. And I got home that night, and I can remember I said to Ivan, I'm not even going to eat anything. I don't feel good. I'm just going to go to bed. And so when I woke up the next morning, I still had that headache. And
Same place?
Yeah, same place, and it was still a bad headache. And I came downstairs, and I was getting ready to go swimming because I always, after we got the pool, I would swim in the morning before I go to school. And I was getting ready to get in the or go to swim, and I don't remember anything after that. So until I woke up a number of days later in the hospital with a stroke. So.
You're in another organization too, and that was called Eastern Star.
Mm-hmm.
And you got involved in that in mid 1970s. Tell me a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about Eastern Star.
Well, Eastern Star is a offshoot of the Masons, and to be an Eastern Star, you either had to have one of the men in your life affiliated was that had to be a Mason, and my dad was a Mason, and Ivan was a Mason, and so I became an Eastern Star. And what we did in our organization was that we raised money um, to for scholarships for members of the Eastern Star, their families that wanted to go to college. Also, we would raise money for anyone that of the members that was having hard luck, like it had fire or, lost their job and needed money or whatever. And we used to put on fish dinner. Well, we used to help the Masons with their fish dinners. And we also would have lunch for the I can't think what they are right now. One of the organizations
Rotary?
here in
Rotary?
Rotary, yes, thank you. Yeah, for the Rotary. Yeah, we used to do lunches for them for years.
Okay. And you had several different positions as well.
Yes.
What were some of those positions?
Well, one was, of course, Eastern Stars is based on the Bible and the women, the great women of the Bible. And so for years I was Ruth, and I had to know by heart the story of Ruth and be able to do that when we had any of our meetings or when we opened our meetings and so on. And then one year I was also worthy matron, as what they called it. Like if you were head of, or you'd be president of the organization, they called them worthy matron, and Dad was worthy patron.
And the year you did that was kind of a significant year in Eastern Star.
Yes, it was their 100th anniversary.
Okay. Now it's at this time where I want to kind of ask a few stories, for you to share a few stories about your family.
Mm.
And we had talked about some of those stories
Mm.
with each one of your kids before. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your oldest son, Mike.
Oh.
What story can you share with us about him?
Well, yeah, I think there's probably many, but one I think of is how he got the scars on his chin. If you ever notice, he has the scars on his chin here. When he was small, and he used to go over with Ivan because Ivan would do the chores with his dad in the morning before he went to work, and at night. Well, it was too early in the morning for Mike to go when he got a little older, but he would go in the evening. He would go over with his dad to Grandpa's, and he would sit on a little stool in the barn and watch his dad and Grandpa milk the cows. And he, this one time when he was there, he got sleepy. It was in the winter time, and he had his snowsuit on, so he was all and his snow hat on, and because it was cold in the barn. And as he sat there, he watching them, he went to sleep, and he fell off the stool for his dad could catch him, and he fell onto the edge of the trough where the edge of the cement anyway, and he busted his chin open. So of course Ivan brought him home, and we went down to Dr. McKay's, and they cleaned it all out and stitched it all up. And then as he got older, let's see, one time he fell when he was at my mother's house. He fell on the cement sidewalk and busted it open again, right in the same spot. So we had to go to Dr. McKay again and get it all stitched up. And I think the last time as he got it opened up was he was a catcher when he started playing ball. That was before he got into sports in school, but the ball teams they have in the summer. He was playing ball, and he was catching, and the ball bounced. He hit home plate and bounced up, and hit him in the chin and knocked it open again. So he got it. Dr. McKay, I think, cut it, sewed it up that time. It was he said about the last time he could do that because it was so much of it was skin that he couldn't get into. Yeah. He'd had it sewed up one too many times.
Yeah. How about Cindy? You have a story about your second oldest?
Let's see.
You said that she always liked to read.
Yes, she did. She was and still is an avid reader. So lots of times when she'd help with the dishes at night, she would catch me up on all the books. That's the way instead of reading a book I had to read for a class, why she would fill me in on all the other good books that were out there that she read. Yes.
How about Mark?
Well, Mark.
Stories about him?
Well, Mark was a different kettle of fish. He kind of danced to his own drummer. But he was probably the calm and coolest one of any of the kids. I think one of the things that he used to do when they were all playing and so on, we had a playpen, and it was set up most of the time because somebody was small enough that had to be in the playpen. Well, Mark didn't have to be in the playpen, and probably Melinda wasn't there at the time that he did this, I remember. Anyway, he decided Cindy and Mike were arguing probably about something, and so he just picked up what toys he was playing with, threw them in the playpen, climbed in the playpen, was sitting there all by himself having a good time. Didn't bother him if he played by himself or not. One other time that I think was the time that the kids all played farm, and they all played Grandpa's farm. And so Mark decided that he would be the cow. And on our front porch out here, there's those spindles ever so far. And that he thought that looked good for a stanchion. So he stuck his head through there between the two spindles. Well, then when they were done playing, he couldn't get out. So anyway, finally the kids called me, and I went out, and of course I pushed and pushed on on his head, almost tore both his ears off trying to get him out. I couldn't get him out, so finally it happened to be that that Ivan came home and got him out of there. I can't remember whether he sawed the one spindle off at the top there, and then put it back after he was all done, so that Mark. But I can remember his ears were pretty red where I had tried to push his head back through the two spindles.
Yeah. How about Melinda? You got a story about her?
Melinda? Well, the one story I think of is that because she and Mark were closer together, and so lots of times I would tell Mark to keep a watch of Melinda when they were playing out here in the yard. And this one day they had been out, and Mark came in the house and probably got a drink, and he wandered around a little bit, and I don't know what he was doing, but anyway, he said, I said to him, "Well, where's your sister?" And he said, "Oh, that's what I meant to tell you. That's why I came in. She's caught up in a tree out here in the backyard, and I can't get her down." so we had to go out and rescue Melinda out of that.
Now with Ivan, I know you have a lot of stories, but he was definitely proud of his showboat, that he had built for the city of Lowell. And I know you were pretty proud of it too. In fact, while he was building it, you said you had even taken your classes, over to the boat, and you could kind of see each other during lunchtime.
Right.
But there's a story that some people know and others may not know, and that was about the showboat around Christmas time. After it had been built, they were moving it. Can you tell a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I can't remember what they were really moving it for, but it had a Christmas tree on top. Dad had put a Christmas tree up there, and they were moving it from one side of the river to the other. And it was on the far side, like would been over there by the Lowell Light and Power Plant. And they were bringing it back up to the dock. And they were, let's see, that had Mike on it, and I don't know whether Mark was with them or not. Ray Quaida was there, and I don't know, maybe some other ones, but
I think Ron Winger might have been there.
Ron probably was there,
Mr.
yes,
Springer was there,
and Mr. Springer. And anyway, they were poling it back up the river, or back down the river, I guess you'd say. And anyway, they got by the big light line that comes across from the power plant to this side of the river, and they got right there, and the power line was lower than they thought it would be. The Christmas tree hit the power line and blew all the lights out on this, made a big sound. I can remember my little dog Harry jumped right up off the ground when he heard the sound, because I was standing on the bank over on this side, and it blew all the lights on this side of town out. Anyway, so they were very lucky, because there wasn't too much said about it, because the city manager was on the boat with them. So they got, but it was one time when the boat blew all the lights out.
Yeah.
They also fried the Christmas tree.
Oh, okay. Now, besides the showboat that he had built, there were a number of other projects that Ivan had built, along the way too. Were there some projects that he was especially proud of besides the showboat?
Well, I don't know. He was especially proud of the historical building, and all the work that he'd done inside of that.
And the porch that he built as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He built the connector building on the Methodist
Yes,
Church.
yes,
That
he
was-
did that. That was another thing that he was proud of, that he could do for his church. Gosh, I can't think of any others.
We had talked the other day about some of the houses that he built too.
Well, that's true. He did a couple geodesic dome houses, which were a challenge. That he did those. He did one that was built. It was quite a round house, but it was built into the side of a hill, so that the roof was the hill. That was the roof of the house, and he had used the ground as heat, and that all flowed through the house. Besides, it had a big round fireplace furnace in the house. Each floor had one of these, and it was an impressive house. It was in I believe at one time it had been shown in Homes and Garden, or either that or an architectural magazine. At one time.
All right, and he also did some other projects. For example, he built his own development.
Oh yes, we owned Birchwood Manor for a while, and put that development in, and yes.
Yeah, and owned his own company and had a number of
Right.
workers that had
Right.
helped him out throughout
Right.
the years.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
He always, in the summertime, he always hired a number of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
There, usually there were the core group would be Ivan and Don and Joe and there's usually 4 of them anyway. But in the summertime, he'd have as many as 10 men that worked for him, and most of those 10 were teachers at different stages.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Lowell Area Historical Museum is proud to sponsor community oral history interviews. The Lowell Area Historical Museum educates, enriches, and inspires our community and visitors through the preservation and presentation of Lowell area history. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688. The Lowell Area Historical Museum is proud to sponsor community oral history interviews. The Lowell Area Historical Museum educates, enriches, and inspires our community and visitors through the preservation and presentation of Lowell area history. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.